Welcome to Week Question and Learn. This is Tom Pysz. And today, a very special guest, Dr. David Frew, historian and author. He is the JES, or a JES scholar in residence. That's the Jefferson Educational Society. And an emeritus professor at Gannon University. He's held a bunch of administrative positions, long 33, maybe even more year-long career. He's also an emeritus director at the Erie County Historical Society. That's the Hagen History Center as well, where he previously served as executive director for 5 years and is president of his own management and consulting business. And we're honored to have you on the air here today. Welcome.
Thank you, Tom. Good to be here.
Good to hear you. Well, let's get down to something that you sent an email, I did some research on. I'm proud to say I don't know anyone else personally that has written as many books as you have. I think the number's up around 40?
Somewhere near there, yes.
And hundreds of articles, if not at least 100 articles published here, there, and everywhere. And you've done a great job with your writing career. And I think this, your recent project, which is just fascinating because it's called Accidental Paradise. And when I saw the name, I thought it was going to be a political commentary of some sort. But actually, it's the story of something very near and dear to the hearts of our community, and that's Presque Isle. Am I right?
That's correct. It's the comprehensive story of Presque Isle.
So give us a quick, what inspired you to write the book, first of all? And then let's talk about what's all in it.
Well, Tom, I love Presque Isle. My wife, Marianne, and I are there almost every day. If we're in town, we're out there doing something, walking, chasing birds, or looking at stuff. In a sense, my wife and I met there when we were teenagers on Beach 6. She was the girl that I didn't know how to approach. Somehow I finally caught up with her, and she didn't run fast enough, and we ended up married. And the place has meant so very, very much to the both of us and to our family that I was between book writing projects one night, sitting waiting for the moon to rise over the city, the October hunter's moon, and we started talking about what I might be writing next. And we left that experience with a plan to create the book about Presque Isle.
That is fabulous. Now, there's been many, but you have a partner involved in this project. Am I correct?
Yeah, my partner in this and many other projects is Jerry Skripczak, who was the CSI detective at the police department for years and years and years. And he fell into that job because he's always been an incredible photographer. I've known Jerry since high school. He was the kid in high school that had the really good camera that took the really great pictures. And in addition to being a talented and artistic photographer himself, he has made a life's work of collecting pictures, local pictures. He's as excited about trains as he is about the waterfront and ships and boats. And he has a home full of the most incredible images. So in recent years, in fact, going back 20 years, if I've ever been in the jam for an image of something, I always went over to see Jerry. When I was at Gannon, he was right across the street, and he's always been able to provide me with whatever I needed. If he didn't have it, he would go and get it. So he's the guy that makes this book look beautiful.
Our reach is a little farther than northwest Pennsylvania, so Presque Isle, some people will go, what is Presque Isle? So a quick photograph of that, if you would.
Well, it's the state park here that surrounds the town, and it's a treat. People come here from out of town, and they drive down the hill, enter the park, and they're waiting for somebody to charge them money. Generally speaking, you don't get to have an experience like the one you can have at Presque Isle without paying something. It's the only surf park in the state of Pennsylvania. It's a beach, and it's a year-round playground. It's as beautiful in the winter in many ways as it is in the summer. And maybe one of the more remarkable things about Presque Isle is somewhere around 4 million people visit Presque Isle every year. So it's the epicenter of the city's cultural, tourist economies, and it's just a place that so many people have fallen in love with.
So obviously there's a huge history behind Presque Isle State Park. the beautiful arm that reaches into Lake Erie. So what inspired the book? What and how far? Well, give us an overview of the book, please.
Well, there are, as you said, many books about Presque Isle, and most of them are wonderful, and most of them are also focused. So there are books about walking the trails and books about using the beaches, but there hasn't really been anything comprehensive that started with the Wisconsin Glacier, which created the park, and or detailed the fragility and importance and power of sand spits. Lake Erie is positioned in a way that it can create sand spits with the sand that moves from the west to the east. It's a unique place. There are several such sand spits on Lake Erie, the largest of which is just immediately across the lake from us at Long Point.
Mm-hmm.
So my objective here was to help people to understand the forces, the geological forces that created Presque Isle, and also to appreciate the fragility of Presque Isle and the degree to which we probably owe it some respect and some support.
I was fascinated by the concept of the book because everybody talks about global warming, and I always laugh, and I said, of course, we were under a couple 100 feet of ice at one time, or at least a lot of ice. And you mentioned a mile. Oh, that's much more than what I imagined. So therefore, Erie, Pennsylvania is possibly the center of global warming. I'm making that up. But give us the concept. How did this occur? We were a mile under ice. Go ahead.
This enormous glacier came from the north and went past us and then got stuck somewhere in the middle of Pennsylvania. And then when it retreated, glaciers have a way of grinding up everything and then collecting it. And as it was melting and retreating to the north, it dropped the sand out. So the gazillions of cubic yards of sand that we see all around Lake Erie were a gift of the Wisconsin Glacier. And I might add a one-time gift. The glacier is not coming back in our lifetime.
No.
So the sand that we have is the sand that we have, and as it works its way through the lakes, we have to try to figure out how to guard it and contain it and keep the beaches nourished.
So subsequently, the peninsula became a homestead for what? Someone?
Well, no, I don't know that it was ever a homestead for anyone. It was so far away from the city that only the adventuresome types were out there prior to its becoming a state park. Of course, it became, from the Corps of Engineers perspective, the thing that made the harbor. And the Corps of Engineers' interests and missions were always commercial shipping, keeping harbors and channels going so that the commerce, things like iron ore coming from Lake Superior and coal, would continue to move efficiently. That was the peninsula's role as far as they were concerned. In the early days, before it became a state park, people from town would take a look at this giant sort of wilderness area that nobody seemed to be interested in, except for the government stations of lighthouses, and the Coast Guard was out there. And they would go out and sort of have their way with it. So in the 25 years before the place became a state park, there was out-of-control lumbering, which would, of course, put the park at risk. Market hunting, that's where you go out with popcorn and attract a bunch of ducks and then blow them up with dynamite. And
I don't think you're teasing me here.
No, I'm not. And there was trapping going on out there also. Somebody with a couple of sticks of dynamite and a bag of popcorn could capture during fall and spring migratory seasons. They could capture 300-400 ducks with a simple explosion.
Oh, that's so sad. I'd never heard that story before.
Well, that sort of thing took place all over the Great Lakes.
Oh, okay.
Not just here.
Well, can I take 10 seconds? You are an expert, at least on the Great Lakes, but at least Lake Erie, and you spent much time on both sides, the north and the south side. Am I correct?
Yeah, I did. In fact, I have or had a 10-year grant to do a program called Canadian Studies just on the other side of the lake. So I've spent countless days, hours, weeks in Port Dover. That was the epicenter of what I was doing over there.
Wonderful. Now, the original residents of Presque Isle, there were folks that lived there. Native?
No,
No. I meant in the native Indians.
no, they didn't live there.
Oh, they didn't. Okay, that's a rumor then. That's one of the things we're going to dispel today, right?
Well, that's one of the two major rumors. The Eries Indians lived on Presque Isle, and the other one is, of course, during the War of 1812, dead bodies were buried in Graveyard Pond, which is why they called it Graveyard Pond. Of course, both of those are just they're stories. They're campfire stories.
Okay.
What we know about the Eries Indians, which isn't as much as we'd like to because they were annihilated by the Iroquois before European contact, is that they were close enough to use it for fishing and hunting, but far enough not to suffer from the storms that went on out there.
Your interest is in Presque Isle, but also the lake in itself on both north and south sides. And how long?
That's exactly correct.
And you spent 10 years on that project involved with Canada. How long have you been working on this concept, or did it just come to you?
Well, it's hard to say that I was ever not working on this project. Much of what I've written and done research about is connected to Presque Isle and or Long Point, which is almost the mirror image of Presque Isle, but bigger on the other side of the lake. Mm-hmm. And both of these giant peninsulas, Long Point being 3 times larger than Presque Isle, were magnets for shipwrecks, which is how I guess I first got interested in them. When the storms come up, and in the old days the ships didn't have warning systems, people would, and this is of course the exact wrong thing to do, run for shallow water and try to find refuge. And there was refuge inside the harbor at Erie. Sometimes people didn't quite make it. And there was refuge behind Long Point. Sometimes people didn't make that either. So if you take a look at where all the shipwrecks were with respect to Lake Erie shipwrecks, and Lake Erie was the epicenter of shipwrecks, they're right around Long Point and right around Presque Isle.
Have you written about the shipwrecks in your long career?
Lake Erie Quadrangle, Waters of Repose. Yes, I have.
I sort of led you into that because I was hoping people would totally understand how involved you become with something that you live next to your whole life virtually, and how this generated a style of life for you. And for those folks who are aspiring to be authors, they should hold you in high esteem because 40 some books, all just on Lake Erie, or have you ventured farther afield?
No, I started my stodgy and traditional academic career writing professional pieces that were supposed to be appealing to people that were, I guess I'm an organizational psychologist by trade, people interested in management and leadership. Then my wife and I wrote a series of textbooks for F.A. Davis in the early 1980s. There are probably 12 or 13 of those. And some of my regular traditional, leadership books, probably half of my books have nothing to do with the Great Lakes. Oh. And those that are critics of my writing about the Great Lakes would say that I'm really not a historian by training or trade, and I understand that. Thank you for the introduction that way. But the number one criticism of my books about Lake Erie is that they seem like maybe case studies written by an engineering kind of guy about stuff that happened to businesses and ships on Lake Erie.
Oh, and let me just interject one thing. The reason this book came out at this time, and maybe it is, this is the 100th anniversary of Presque Isle State Park.
That's correct. This is the 100th year since we established Presque Isle as a state park.
That's fabulous. What a great birthday present for the community. Okay, what's your favorite part of the book? You probably have several, but I know authors somewhat meander across a point and seem to enjoy it more than the rest, especially folks who understand history the way you do. What's your favorite story about Presque Isle?
Well, I like the development of the roads and the decision making about how to create the roads.
Oh,
In
okay, yeah.
1921, when we became quote unquote a state park, if we could raise the money, and the people in Harrisburg were trying to put us off. They didn't think we could possibly raise the money to make this into a state park, but we did. The next step in creating an actual viable park was to figure out how people were going to get there. So probably up until the 40s or 50s, most people got to the state park by taking a ferry across from the city of Erie.
Oh, okay.
And
Sure.
the Waterworks compound, which was established out there long before the state park, was there. There were some problems with cholera in Erie, Pennsylvania during the early days. We were gathering the water with a short tube out into the bay, and we were discharging sewage with a short tube out into the bay. And,
that's logical. Okay.
Well, we weren't the only ones doing that. The water gathering and the sewage treatment, which was let's get rid of it and get it out in the water so it'll wash away.
Yeah.
It worked okay unless there was a northeast wind. So as long as the wind continued from the southwest, which is the prevailing direction,
yes,
no issues. But as soon as the wind turned around, suddenly people were getting sick and dying. And somehow the water department, after they had worked through the repair of that, decided that they should do something to give back, and they got into the parks and beaches and recreation business. They started out with a swimming pool, a municipal swimming pool at the foot of Chestnut Pool, and then they were looking across the bay, thinking we should do something with all this property we're controlling out there. The whole middle part was controlled by the water department in those days. So they went out there and established beaches on the bay side, by the way, and bandstands and ball fields. Ball fields were really popular during the Victorian era. And the vestiges of all that stuff are still visible if you wander around and look.
That's fascinating. Now, Presque Isle State Park, and Presque Isle may have suffered a more onerous fate. Actually, Andrew Carnegie had his eye on the peninsula. Is that correct?
Well, we brought him here and tried to convince him that we would give it to him if he would build a steel mill.
Wow.
So the industrial leaders of town were trying to think of some way to add jobs and power to the economy. And given the era, the late 1800s, and the rise of steel, and the importance of having water access so that you could bring iron ore. The three things you need for making steel are iron ore, coal, and oxygen, of course. The iron ore was available. It was coming on ships. So they went to Carnegie, who had steel mills in the Pittsburgh area, and they said, we heard you're thinking of building another steel mill. Why don't you come on up here and take a look? We got a spot for you.
Wow.
So they offered him Presque Isle. And they gave him the cook's tour and drove him around in a fish tug so he could see the bay and how it all worked. And when he saw the giant piles of coal and iron ore that were already in the bayfront, he got to thinking that he might have a hard time worming his way in here. And he later decided that it would be easier to build a railroad to the lake and acquire the iron ore. He had the coal because he was in the Pittsburgh area.
Right.
Than it would be to build a new steel mill. So he expanded the existing steel mills and built a railroad to Conneaut. And the reason why he went to Conneaut, of course, is there was hardly anything happening there, so he effectively owned that dock in that town as soon as he got there. He didn't have to fight his way through the established people that were controlling Erie.
Well, that's an accolade to his wisdom and a benefit to us in the long run.
Lucky us.
We are.
We're seeing a steel mill?
We're blessed. Could you imagine the peninsula? Now, I've always heard stories, and I'm looking to your expertise, that the peninsula is washed through several times. Is that right?
It has what? I'm sorry?
Washed through. In other words,
yes.
The lake has...
Go ahead. Well, just last year we had blowouts in which water was crossing from the bayside to the lakeside.
Mm-hmm.
And the more important issue is when the Corps of Engineers was summoned here to try to build a channel, and of course all the leaders of industry and shipping here wanted the channel exactly where we think it is. The Corps of Engineers came here and said, that's not a good place to have a channel. We know there's one now there, and you've been trying to keep it going, but hard to keep it going. The early days, the Corps of Engineers could not dredge. All they could do was drag metal blades across the bottom and try to move stuff around.
Mm.
They said the best place to have a channel would be at the west end of Presque Isle.
Oh, my.
Because, as they said, according to our records, for more than 60% of the time since we've been keeping records and until now, there's always been a channel in the west end of the peninsula. Sometimes the west channel, or cut as it was called by the locals, was 100 feet wide, navigable by large ships. Now, the Reeds and the people that were in the shipping business did not want a channel on the west side, and their reasoning was that most of our business at that time was coming from the east, so they were east-centric, Buffalo-oriented.
Mm-hmm.
They were thinking that the only real reason why a ship would stop in Erie is because it's kind of easy, and you can tuck in here and resupply stuff that you need to power your ship. If a ship were to go the length of the peninsula and start thinking about going into the cut on the west side or a real formal channel, they would think twice about why don't we just keep going and we'll go to the next port, Ashtabula or Conneaut. So they fought against the Corps of Engineers. And of course, these days people are wondering, was that the best decision for a variety of reasons?
That's a fascinating story. And thank goodness, by quirk of fate or by politics, whatever the case may be, everything ended up the way it is today. Now, the peninsula itself, environmentally beautiful, as you know. I'm
spectacular.
Beyond belief. I think it's one of the core places to visit in the United States. What about those stone walls? What's the story behind the barricade?
Well, they were controversial. They were controversial when they were built.
Mm-hmm.
But at the time that they were built, no one could have imagined this long period of extraordinarily and scary high water and the warming of the lake, which has been keeping us most years. This year is different from having ice dunes to protect the sand.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So as controversial as they were at the beginning, and as many people as there were that jumped up and down and said, no, we shouldn't have those things,
mm-hmm.
Looks like on balance, it's a pretty good thing that they're there. And one of the things that they do that most people don't recognize is they're designed to gather sand.
Mm-hmm.
So if you were to take a bird's eye view of those rock mounds, what you see growing from the beach out to the rock mounds is a little sort of a peaked ridge of sand that's collecting. Those are called tombolos, technically. Mm-hmm. And what we can do in terms of finding extra sand to spread on the beaches, we can go to those tombolos every 2 or 3 years, and we can dig the sand out and move it right up and spread it on the beach. So
in the end, that turned out to be a very successful story. It was a good thing.
I think it did. There's some problems with them, but on balance, I'm now convinced that it was a good thing.
Well, as you look at them over the years, they sort of, I don't want to use the word disappear, but they sort of mentally blend into the scenery. It's unusual, but on the other hand, after a long number of years, I don't think people think of them as not part of Presque Isle. And obviously, from what you've just said, they had a good benefit.
Yes.
What other features of the book, what other stories in your book that is Accidental Paradise, the 13,000-year history of Presque Isle? What's another favorite topic that you've written about?
Well, one of my favorite topics is the chapters that discuss the history of Native Americans in this area, the Iroquois, the Eries, and all the cousin tribes that were here,
mm-hmm.
and how they were negatively impacted by European arrival. It turned into, aggressive warrior people. The Iroquois were living happily after the appearance of the great peacemaker that said to them, you've got to make peace, got to have yourself a sort of a constitutional system so that you don't fight with each other.
Mm-hmm.
And that all fell apart as soon as Europeans got here and they started chasing after beaver. So we think of what Europeans were looking for when they came here in terms of Spanish and gold. In actual fact, a much more important and much more valuable and easier to move commodity were American furs. So by the time of European arrival, Europe was sort of wiped out. There were hardly any forests there. And what became enormously popular that you could get here in the United States and get easily was animal furs, the most popular of which was the beaver, which could be made into the beaver hat, which was incredibly popular in Europe, especially in England and France. So the Europeans came and they started convincing the Iroquois that they should get beavers and trade them with them, and they provided them with guns and ammunition to do that. And in effect, they destabilized the peaceful agreements between the 5 and later 6 Iroquois tribes and turned the Iroquois into sort of an aggressive people who were trying to eliminate the competition here on the ground.
Fabulous story. Accidental Paradise, the 13,000-year history of Presque Isle. I know you did not write the book from memory, but I know that you have the equivalent of that much experience on the history of this wonderful part of the country and history unto itself. Now, you are also, you do presentations at the world-renowned Jefferson Educational Society. Have you done one on your book here?
Yeah, we've done a couple. We did a general one in which we introduced the book, and we did one a couple weeks ago in which we talked about the Native Americans. And we've got one happening today and this afternoon. You can catch all of these streaming. You don't have to see them you don't have to see them live.
That's great. In this era, the COVID era, it's wonderful that you're recording these and making them available to the public. So
that's a wonderful thing that the Jefferson Society has been doing.
Yes.
But today's discussion has to do with the high water levels and the risk that those pose to Presque Isle.
Well, this seems like it's more than a hobby for you. It's a career, but it's also, it's always seemed to me that it's been one of your immense passions, and we're grateful that you're doing this. I'm sure there's other historians, as you have mentioned, that have written on specific topics, but you seem to be our resident, our history resident for Northwest Pennsylvania and beyond, and so we're grateful that you took a few minutes to chat with us. The book, Accidental Paradise, it's certainly an education for people of all ages. It's certainly a nice history book that should be on the shelf, and I'm sure it will be for many, many years at the library. Thank you very much. I'm sure if people would like to learn more about the book and yourself, they can find you at the JES website, I'm sure, looking for your future lectures and lectures that have been recorded, and we're grateful that you could speak with us today on We Question and Learn on WQLN, and thank you very much.
You're so welcome, Tom. And by the way, the book has its own website, accidentalparadise.com.
Fabulous. It's a fascinating story. Even if you don't live on the shores of Lake Erie, I think you're going to find this a fascinating part of American history. Thank you again.
Thank you.
I'm Michelle Martin. These days it seems like just about everybody is choosing sides and doubling down on talking points. Here at NPR, we try to cut through the noise with meaningful and respectful discussions with people from all perspectives, backgrounds, and walks of life. Join the conversation every weekend on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Saturday and Sunday afternoons at 5 on WQLN Radio.
Hi, this is Steve Inskeep. When you roll out of bed, bleary-eyed and groggy, if you're like me, the first thing on your mind is getting something to wake you up. So turn on the radio. NPR's daily news program, Morning Edition, has been working through the night to get you the news you need. It's as essential to your morning as a good cup of coffee. So hit the ground running. by listening to Morning Edition from NPR News.
Weekday mornings at 5 on WQLN Radio.
Welcome to Week Question and Learn. This is Tom Pysz. Our program is now celebrating its 17th year on the air here at WQLN. We are also on 8 other podcast venues. Today we have the president of the Bridge Builders Community Foundations. Notice I said plural. Trenton Moulin is here with us, and we're going to gain today a ton of information about an organization that's been in our community since 1975, and to help us along is our interview with Trenton. And greetings to you. I hope things are well. First,
greetings, Tom, and
good.
Congrats on your 17th year of this. This is great.
If we get lucky, we'll make 18th by July, so let's cross our fingers. But it's always been a pleasure. You've been here before, but your organization, speaking of longevity, I believe has been around since 1975. Is that right?
Yeah, it was established by local attorneys and businessmen and bankers in 1975, and the first contributions were given to it by Mrs. Harrington and Mrs. Rue in 1977.
Wow, oh, cool. Now, your area has some huge historical value. Geographically, where's your office?
We are located in the National Transit Building Annex, which was a building that was a subsidiary of the Standard Oil Company.
I understand your office is where J.D. Rockefeller had his?
No.
Let's explain that little bit of humor, okay? You are in the National Transit Building, which is, I believe, on the Historic Registry. Am I correct?
Yeah, you are correct.
And that goes back to the oil era. And it's a rumor that Mr. Rockefeller, obviously prominent in the oil industry, and of course your area being prominent in the oil industry, had a great interest in that community years ago. And I guess the rumor is that he may have had an office in your building, or actually the building next to you.
Well, actually, he was only here in the oil regions, is what they called it, twice.
Okay.
There might have been a third time, yeah. But his number 4 guy, who was Mr. Seep, he was number 4 in the whole company. He had his office here in the transit building.
I think people just need to visit one time to walk through your lobby and in between the offices, because that building carries actually artifacts going back to that age, right?
Yeah. We have wooden pipelines. Those were the original type of pipelines. They would take a tree, they would core it out, and they would wrap it in barrel bands, and then put oil or pitch around it to seal it. And those were the original oil lines, which were wooden.
Amazing. And in the building itself, was that a bank of some sort or a repository?
No, it was built for the National Transit Company, which was the largest subsidiary of Standard Oil.
And that's the company that transported the oil out of the Oil City region.
Yeah, it was in charge of all the transportation of oil, and lots and lots of oil and lots of money went through here. In today's standards, let alone back in the early 1900s, until about the 1950s, I believe.
Is that building open for a tour, or do you just walk in and frequent the retail and business folks that are there?
It has public portions of it.
Okay.
That lobby that you were mentioning with the historical mural and that type of thing, that's definitely open. And there's also historical tours that are given by the Historical Society and
there you go.
the organizations, and you can kind of look online for those and social media, et cetera.
For history buffs, I would humbly suggest they take a walk through there. Now, over the year, you've been located at that office right along in your tenure as executive director, or were you located somewhere else?
We started across the street whenever I began here 10 years ago, this fall.
Wow.
And then we were looking for something that had handicapped access and a little bit more of a professional feel to it. And so we moved probably about a year and a half, 2 years after I started. So we've been in a transit building for probably about 9 years now.
Visiting you is always a wonderful experience. You felt like you were going right back to the olden days, so to speak, because the structure and the architecture have not changed anything. It's pretty much as it was, right?
Yeah. We've there's been a lot of diligence given to trying to keep the integrity of the building, have that historical character. Some changes need to be made. We need to have room to run wires and what have you for the modern technology and things like that. But we try to respect the building.
No steam radiators and. I guess, what did they call it? Pneumatic tubes to transfer messages from one floor to the other?
Yep.
Nope,
Yep.
You're beyond that already. Those
aren't utilized. They're there, but we don't use them.
Give us a over. That's right, they still are. Come to think of it, so it's got to be fun to come to work, at least for the ambiance in your office. But how did the bridge builders? You mentioned who founded it, but what was the mission and purpose back then? How did that all work out?
Well, it was created as a community foundation to be a repository for those smaller trusts and individuals that had philanthropic intentions that wanted to give back to their community in some way, shape, or form. And the community foundation was kind of established to be that repository and to be that nonprofit that would carry out those wishes of donors that wanted to make a gift that would be mostly from a legacy standpoint, permanent endowments and that type of thing.
So, say when you started, how large was the foundation?
In assets, it's going back in the archives. I think we were just shy of $5 million, and that was 10 years ago.
And today?
We're over 20 million.
That's amazing. And all that growth happened when? In your tenure or in the last 20?
That was 10 years. So, I mean, when I started, we were at about just shy of 5 million. And then, it's been a whirlwind. But it's really has to be attributed to the generosity of so many individuals in our community that want to give back and assist in some way, and it's all because of them.
Now, interestingly enough, your title says not foundation. I'm reading this correct. It says foundations plural. That's sort of unusual. People sort of drop the S on you, I'm sure, but there's a reason that you are numerically more than one. How did that come about?
Well, the original community foundation was started as the Venango Area Community Foundation in 1975, as we mentioned earlier. Mm-hmm. And then there were individuals from Forest County and Clarion County that wanted to find a similar organization to give to. And so they reached out to the Venango Area Community Foundation. And after years of discussion, the governance model was changed, and the name was changed to incorporate 3 affiliates. The Venango Area Community Foundation, a group of individuals from Forest County gathered and created the Forest County Community Foundation, and then a group of individuals from Clarion County, they got together and they created the Clarion County Community Foundation, and these are all affiliates underneath the Bridge Builders Community Foundation's umbrella.
So geographically, wow, you stretch quite a few miles. Do you go as far as the Ohio border that way, or you just is it Route 79 over to Oil City, or how does that look on a map for someone who's not familiar with your part of Pennsylvania?
Not to the border, but we cover Venango County, Clarion, and Forest County.
Forest counties, and that's sort of a whole quadrant centered at Oil City, Pennsylvania, right?
Yep.
Yeah,
That's
beautiful.
definitely Venango County is our center of gravity, and I would say 90% of our funds are from Venango County.
And interestingly enough, a lot of what's happened in Northwest Pennsylvania actually was started in your neck of the woods. When you think about it, I think. Wasn't it true at one time they thought that would be the Erie, Pennsylvania of this part of the world, so to speak? Geographically, economically, railroad-wise?
And it Pit Hole, it was the 3rd largest, which is a ghost town now. It was a boom town And it was the third largest post office in Pennsylvania for like 2 years.
So people
And
know
that's
that's
about 5
where
miles north of here.
Yeah, that's where the oil industry of the world, or at least of the country, started.
Yep, and what they called the oil regions, and,
and
it was quite the Wild West from my
gosh.
reading.
Going back to, let's see, there's the first oil well derrick sitting down there. That's a whole park facility. That's in your territory. There's a beautiful museum right down the road from you, which is phenomenal and has just been renovated. There's quite a few well-funded organizations, all seed capital from this oil industry, going back, 150 years now?
Yeah, a little bit over.
Yeah. So today, your fund is up to $20 million. Your mission, education, outreach, or do the affiliates of the donors dictate how the money is distributed in the community? How does it work for you?
Well, we work collaboratively on that.
Okay.
We had a recent fund that was established, and when we sat down with her, and she had initial discussions about establishing a scholarship, and then through a couple conversations, we kind of expanded that to be not only a scholarship but also to help out with the trades, and out of those discussions, and we really just kind of fleshed out what she wanted and offered our suggestions and our professional opinions and thoughts about what the needs are in the community. So it's really a collaborative process, and but they're conversations that I feel that we have a responsibility to have, just because we have an understanding of what the needs are in the community, because we work with them all day, and really the woman that set up this fund, it's for the trades. She was very grateful that we had those discussions, because it more reflected her wishes, and she had not even thought about some of those options that would be available to help out the community.
And this is an anonymous donor, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Good.
Yep. She
And
would
that's
like to
how that
remain
stays.
anonymous,
Yeah,
and
that's great.
but it's a fund fairly sizable that's going to help about many kids and students and that are pursuing the trades and nursing in Venango County.
That's fabulous.
And the programs that support those students also.
Interestingly enough, and this is the question that I ask practically all organizations, particularly ones like yours, tell us a little bit about your board of directors. Now,
You're trying to get me in trouble? You're trying to get me in trouble, Tom.
No. I was going to ask, are they an active board, i.e. participatory? Or are they just a voting board? Or I'm sure they're not a vanity board, because I'm sure they work very hard with you in the community. But are they all from the region? You don't have to name anyone, but are they all from the region? Or do you reach?
They are all, I would say, from Western Pennsylvania, but they all have a sincere and dedication to making Clarion, Venango, and Forest counties a better place to be.
Yeah, so your reach is a little bit farther than just the dotted lines on the map, so to speak.
Yeah, it's not a defined line. We have, we want to make the whole area better, right? Because, you might live in Meadville but work in Oil City, or you might live in Franklin and go to Meadville. It's really a regional approach type of situation, but we focus on those 4 counties mostly. We want that's our center of gravity. If you serve on the board, we want you to have a focus, because that's our mission, and we want to be very mission focused. Our board comprises of individuals from each one of those counties. Those affiliates that I had mentioned earlier, they nominate 2 or 3 per county, and then they serve on the trustee board.
That's where I was going with
this. That's the governing body.
Yeah, you have a superstructure, a structure. Then there's yourself and your fellow employees, and as the foundation itself. Now, are there other foundation? Is everything in your office, or are there offices in your region? For instance, Venango, or Clarion, or Punxsutawney, or Forest, or does everything come to you?
We have one office. We have one office. Yep. This is where the professional staff is located. We have our board meetings here Well, we've had them in the past. We're going to start here soon, hopefully.
Yeah, if things work out.
Just
But
because
boy,
of
what a
pandemic.
beautiful place to have a board meeting. You just the whole premise, the premises there just seeps with history. You just feel like you're part of something huge and that you're carrying it forward. You have donor advised funds. You have just a general fund. So I guess you're charged with doing some research as to what's the most important thing in Oil City and these other regions. What's
Yeah,
critical?
Yeah, keeping a pulse on the needs in the community is one of our bigger focuses, and that comes with working with the nonprofits that are doing the work in the trenches, and making sure that we keep in contact with them and understanding what they're facing, so that we can help them not only from a financial standpoint, but also help them with resources other than financial, whether that be some capacity, connections to other funding sources, to just working together on a project. And one of the best examples that I have of that, we started a call when the pandemic first lockdown hit last March.
Yes.
And every other week we started a nonprofit call for nonprofit leaders, because all of our heads were spinning. We had to do everything new, and that was something that we've continued to this day, and we're looking to leverage that and springboard that forward to help the nonprofits in our community plan as we emerge from this pandemic. But I look back through my notes from those calls from March on, and boy, our heads were spinning, but we kept focused on why we're doing it, for the people that needed our help, from all the nonprofit leaders in our community. And that those calls really helped me, just be able to know that we're not alone. And I think it helped out a lot of the other nonprofit leaders in our area as we try to navigate this difficult time. And hopefully we can use that bridge building, no pun intended, to
that's a
springboard us forward. And
that's a great title, by the way, when you think about it, because you're helping folks move from one end of the spectrum, that of great need, into solving problems for nonprofits, but also for the community as well. Are there community projects that you support, or are you all on the philanthropic side, or do you get involved with any kind of, I want to say urban development, economic development? Maybe you have a donor-advised fund that recommends you help support that. Is that part of your venue, if I could ask?
Well, it depends on where those needs are, and we've kind of focused recently on the COVID-related needs, right?
Okay,
how do we make sure that we have food security? How do we make sure we have shelter security? How do we make sure that we can help those nonprofits that are addressing those issues better serve those? And now we're trying to look forward, and something that was always an going in our area that was exacerbated by the pandemic is housing. And I think that, we're going to be kind of gathering a group that serve those centered around housing and shelter in our area, to make sure that that we can address those needs that are going to be, I think, really facing us even at a higher level because of the pandemic and what have you. So we'd like to focus on housing. And really what came out of that, we had a house donated to us, and we partnered with a local nonprofit to rehab that house. And they have a House of Trades program, the nonprofit's Keystone Smiles. And they taught kids how to do the electrical and pour the cement, and then all the while they fixed up this house, and then we sold it, and then the proceeds helped out that program and also the community in that area. So that, and coming out of that little microcosm of one house being donated really got me thinking about what we as a community foundation can do for housing in general in our area.
Economically, how does Pennsylvania, how does the United States classify your area? Is it considered very poor, a lot of middle class housing? How would you rate, or how are you rated relative to need?
It's usually And I'm looking at like the kind of we're part of the Appalachian. I forget what that's called right now.
Yeah. I was just.
It's always on the cusp.
Yeah.
It's always on the cusp.
I was
or,
just
or
Appalachia, so
level.
to speak. I was just driving towards that point that sometimes that dotted line extends into the hills where you are, and I was wondering if that was part of your mission or prompted your mission, or it causes you to find great need in the community and therefore you invest that money in those areas. Just was curious how that worked out.
It's always on the cusp whenever we look at the numbers, if not depressed. So we keep that in mind, but we're also looking to the future. I mean, we have a great housing stock. The infrastructure's here. We have the benefit of a lot of broadband. We could use more.
Sure.
And we've seen a lot of influx from individuals that wanted to sell their house in the big city and move, to our area. I talked to realtors. They had banner years last year.
I was going to say, if you start measuring how many people have exited just New York City, or out in California where they're moving en masse to the hills, so to speak, and be careful, the real estate people, if folks in New York or wherever, and I know New York City folks are wandering over to Western Pennsylvania, but I don't think they've discovered you yet. But one of the values is where you are, the scenery, and there's actually an enclave or two there already. Where people
and we have access.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Tom. I'm sorry to
go
interrupt.
ahead.
There's a little delay there.
Nope, go ahead.
No, and we can go to Erie for the day and come back. We can go to Pittsburgh for the day and come back. We can visit the zoos. We can visit the amenities that are, in those. And we have a lot to offer, I think, in our area. And I think there's a lot of, newfound optimism, especially as we're coming out of this pandemic.
So would you say that, well, you're sort of locked into your immediate goal, and that's to offset the detriments of the pandemic. So I guess it's difficult to plan, but are you still sitting around and talking about plans for the next few years? Have you folks literally, okay, this will be over hopefully pretty soon. What are we going to do next?
Yeah, and it's a different part of the brain. For so long, we were looking at those immediate needs, and we were looking at it day to day, maybe a week to week type situation. But really, we're engaging the nonprofit leaders to see how we can assist them as we plan to emerge from this, and how do we plan, years out, because there's going to be delays in education. There's going to be delays in services that were provided. There's going to be gaps there that have been really ripped wide open because of this. So how do we plan and how do we work together? And maybe even as perceived competitors on the nonprofit level, how do we work together to address these problems and continue that? And how do we also plan as organizations so that if the next emergency comes or the next disaster comes, we have a plan ready in place so we're not scrambling, that type of thing. How do we have succession planning, right? How do we as organizations just have the capacity to deal with the next problem that we're going to face? So,
let alone worrying about development, economic development in the way of inviting industry or subsequently folks moving to the area. Although, boy, sometimes when I drive through there, I can't imagine someone not wanting a piece of property up in the hills and just enjoying that part of the world. It's a hidden treasure.
Well, you're talking to somebody biased here, Tom.
Yes, I appreciate that. And let alone the history and even the architecture. There's some fascinating places down there's homesteads that are just absolutely gorgeous, and boy, I'll tell you what, this is turning into the Oil City travel and tourism program here. We better let those folks have their own time at the podium. Any other thoughts on bridge builders, the bridge builders community foundations? Do you think you'll assimilate more regional groups, or is this it? And how do you feel about the future? I know you want to say something optimistic, and you're allowed, but is the fund about where it's going to be, or or is it just day to day and you're doing the best you can, solving as many problems as you can? Maybe fundraising is not the key issue right now.
Well, Tom, about $5 million ago, which was 3 years ago, I thought to myself, okay, we're going to use this year to kind of regroup, plan, formalize a lot of these things, and institutionalize what we have going on. And right after I thought that, we had our banner year, which was
wow.
2 years ago.
Yeah.
And so we have a flywheel spinning here, and there's a lot of generous people that really want to make our area a better place. And so we're just putting in the infrastructure now. And I have a great team, Lauren and Michelle, and we're just putting the infrastructure in place so that we can carry out those wishes, assist the community, and be ready for the next 10 years and see where we fit. And I think as an organization, we have defined what we do. Also we're defining what we don't do, which is just as important. And having both sides of those coins conscious, having a great board that's really committed to the development of this community in all its facets. I couldn't ask for a better board. I couldn't ask for a better team. And, I can't say that we're going to pause because we're just going to keep moving forward, but also we want to help the community at large. And that's what we're here for. That's what we have a unique responsibility for. And I'm very fortunate to be able to wake up every morning and ask myself, and I know a lot of my board members do the same thing, of how do we make the community a better place?
Wonderful.
That's about it in a nutshell.
Wonderful outline. Interestingly enough, to me, I can't tell you how many times I have found a dotted line back down to Pittsburgh, obviously up to Erie, and even across the country. Some incredible names, some folks that have vested interests in your part of the world, and they live in some very prominent places. So your office is at the center of a hidden treasure in more ways than one. Geographically, of course, the scenery and the ambiance of where you are. Also, the good work that you do with all the schools, the community, scholarships, etc., makes Bridge Builders Community Foundations a wonderful community asset. And I congratulate you personally, and I'm allowed to do this, on all the hard work I've seen you do, at least over the last 5 years that we've talked with each other. So congratulations on your outcomes. You're on the fast track in the right direction.
Thank you very much for your kind words, and it wouldn't happen without the donors. It wouldn't happen without my team. And congrats again on your 17th year, Tom. I appreciate you bringing me back.
Well, we're working on 18. We'll see how that goes. But if someone wanted more information about the Bridge Builders Community Foundations, or just maybe, hey, sometimes folks just want to call and chat with you to gain some information, what's the best way to find you, Trenton Moulin?
We have a great website, bbcf.org, Bridge Builders Community Foundations. It's bbcf.org. And then our phone number is 814-677-8687. And always welcome to talk.
It'd be great. Trenton, thank you very much. It's always a pleasure to chat with you, and I'm sure we'll catch up again in this year. Hopefully by next year when we talk again, maybe all this stress will be gone and we can move forward with all the good work that you're doing. Thank you very much for being here today.
Oh, thanks for having me, Tom.